Negative thoughts are not something that appear by mistake, nor are they proof that something is wrong with you. They are natural mental events that arise from the mind's attempt to protect, interpret, and predict. The problem begins when these thoughts are misunderstood. When a negative thought appears, most people immediately label it as an enemy. They judge themselves for having it, resist it, or attempt to suppress it. This reaction creates inner conflict, and that conflict is often more damaging than the thought itself. A negative thought is a signal, it is information. Just as physical pain signals imbalance or injury in the body, mental discomfort signals imbalance in attention, emotion, or understanding. The mind uses negative thoughts to highlight fear, uncertainty, unmet needs, or unresolved experiences. If these signals are ignored or attacked, they become louder. If they are observed and understood, they begin to lose intensity. Many negative thoughts are rooted in fear. Fear of failure, fear of rejection, fear of loss, fear of not being enough. These fears often come from past experiences where the mind learned to associate certain situations with danger or pain. The mind then tries to prevent future harm by generating warning thoughts. It does not matter whether the threat is real or imagined, the mind reacts based on memory and conditioning. When you understand this, you stop taking negative thoughts personally. You see that they are automatic responses, not accurate reflections of reality. The mistake is identification. When a negative thought arises and you say, "This is me," or "This is true," you fuse your identity with the thought. The thought then gains authority over your emotions and behavior. But when you recognize the thought as a signal rather than a truth, you create space. In that space, you are no longer controlled by the thought. You become the observer instead of the victim. Observation does not mean agreement. It also does not mean resistance. It means allowing the thought to be present without reacting. This is a skill that must be trained. At first, the mind will try to pull you into judgment or storytelling. It will say, "Why do I think like this?" or "I should not be this way." These secondary thoughts create self-judgment, which strengthens the original negativity. The correct response is simple awareness, noticing that a thought has appeared and staying with the experience without commentary. When negative thoughts are observed calmly, they often reveal their message. A thought about failure may signal fear of inadequacy or a lack of preparation. A thought about rejection may signal a need for acceptance or self-worth. A thought about exhaustion may signal that boundaries have been ignored. When you listen in this way, negative thoughts become teachers. They guide you toward areas that require attention, discipline, or compassion. Inner conflict arises when you fight your own mind. The mind produces a thought, and then another part of the mind attacks it. This creates division. One part is afraid, another part is angry, and another part feels ashamed. Over time, this inner war drains energy and creates chronic tension. When you stop treating negative thoughts as enemies, this conflict dissolves. There is no longer a need to win or lose. There is only understanding. Self-judgment is one of the most destructive habits connected to negative thinking. When a person judges themselves for having certain thoughts, they add a layer of emotional pain that was never necessary. The thought itself may be uncomfortable, but the judgment makes it heavy. Understanding that thoughts are not chosen removes this burden. You did not decide to have the thought, you only decide how to relate to it. This shift in relationship changes everything. Instead of asking, "How do I get rid of this thought?" you ask, "What is this thought pointing to?" This question transforms resistance into curiosity. Curiosity is calm. It allows the mind to stay open rather than defensive. When the mind is open, clarity arises naturally. Negative thoughts also appear more frequently when the mind is overstimulated or the body is exhausted. Lack of rest, excessive information, emotional overload, and irregular routines weaken mental stability. In these conditions, the mind becomes reactive and produces more warning signals. Understanding this prevents unnecessary self-blame. Sometimes the solution is not psychological analysis, but physical regulation, sleep, movement, breath, and structure. Stillness plays a crucial role. When the mind is constantly occupied, signals become distorted. In stillness, the difference between useful signals and habitual noise becomes clear. This is why silence and reflection are essential. In silence, negative thoughts slow down. Some dissolve immediately, others remain, but their message becomes easier to understand. Over time, as observation becomes consistent, the mind learns that it does not need to shout to be heard. Negative thoughts become quieter and less frequent because they are no longer ignored or resisted. They are acknowledged and integrated. This is not suppression, it is resolution. It is important to understand that not every negative thought carries deep meaning. Some are simply echoes of habit. The mind repeats what it is used to repeating. Observation allows you to see which thoughts deserve attention and which can be allowed to pass without engagement. This discernment develops naturally with practice. When negative thoughts are treated as signals, compassion replaces fear. You stop seeing yourself as broken and start seeing yourself as learning. This perspective builds patience. Growth is no longer rushed or forced. It unfolds through awareness and consistency. This approach also builds emotional resilience. When difficulties arise, negative thoughts may still appear, but they do not overwhelm. You understand their role. You know how to listen without drowning. This creates inner stability even in challenging circumstances. The goal is not to create a permanently positive mind. Such a goal is unrealistic and exhausting. The goal is to create a stable mind that can meet negativity without collapsing or reacting destructively. Stability allows both positive and negative experiences to be handled with balance. When you no longer see negative thoughts as enemies, you stop fighting yourself. Energy that was wasted on resistance becomes available for clarity, discipline, and purposeful action. The mind becomes less noisy, not because thoughts are controlled, but because they are understood. In this way, negative thoughts become allies in self-awareness. They point to growth, not weakness. They show where attention is needed, not where shame belongs. By observing them correctly, you end inner conflict and self-judgment. What remains is a quieter, clearer mind that works with you instead of against you. Awareness is the foundation of inner freedom. Without awareness, the mind operates automatically, repeating patterns formed by past experiences, habits, and conditioning. In this state, thoughts arise and immediately turn into emotions and actions without being questioned. Life becomes reactive rather than conscious. When awareness is trained, this automatic process begins to slow down, and in that slowing, a crucial distance is created between you and the activity of the mind. Most people believe they are their thoughts because they experience them continuously. A thought appears, and instantly it feels personal, true, and urgent. There is no pause to observe it. This lack of distance creates identification. When you identify with a thought, it dictates your emotional state and behavior. A fearful thought creates anxiety, a judgmental thought creates anger, and a hopeless thought creates withdrawal. Awareness interrupts this chain. Awareness means noticing what is happening in the mind without becoming entangled in it. It is the ability to observe thoughts as mental events, rather than facts. This observation does not require effort or force, it requires attention. When a thought is seen clearly, it loses its grip. The moment you recognize a thought is happening, you are no longer fully inside the thought. You are standing slightly apart from it. This distance is subtle but powerful. It is the difference between being caught in a storm and watching the storm from a sheltered place. The storm still exists, but it no longer defines your movement. In the same way, thoughts may continue to arise, but they no longer control your inner state or actions. This is not avoidance, it is clarity. Training awareness is a gradual process. At first, the mind moves faster than awareness. You may only notice thoughts after they have already influenced your emotions or behavior. This is normal. The purpose of training is not immediate perfection, but increased recognition. Each moment of noticing strengthens awareness. Over time, the noticing happens earlier, and the distance grows. The body plays an important role in this training. Awareness is not only mental, it is embodied. When attention is anchored in the body through posture, breath, or sensation, the mind becomes easier to observe. A stable body supports a stable awareness. This is why disciplined physical practices are essential for mental clarity. They give awareness something steady to rest on while the mind moves. As awareness deepens, you begin to see patterns. You notice that certain thoughts arise in specific situations. You see how the same narratives repeat, often without relevance to the present moment. This recognition weakens their authority. A thought that was once believed without question is now seen as a familiar pattern. Familiarity removes fear. Distance from the mind does not mean suppression of thinking. Thinking remains necessary for practical life. The difference is that thinking becomes a tool rather than a master. When awareness is present, you think when needed and stop when not needed. There is choice. Without awareness, thinking continues compulsively, often against your will. This choice is where power emerges. Power does not mean control over every thought. It means the ability to choose your response. When a negative thought arises, awareness allows you to pause. In that pause, you can decide whether the thought is useful, whether it requires action, or whether it can be ignored. Without awareness, there is no pause, and therefore no choice. Unconscious reaction is exhausting. It keeps the nervous system in a constant state of alert. Awareness restores calm because it breaks the cycle of automatic response. You realize that you do not have to respond to every thought emotionally or behaviorally. Many thoughts require no response at all. Awareness also reveals the impermanent nature of thoughts. When you observe without interference, you see that thoughts arise and pass on their own. They do not need to be solved or eliminated. This realization reduces urgency. A thought that once demanded immediate action is now seen as temporary. Patience becomes natural. Another important aspect of awareness is non-judgment. When awareness is mixed with judgment, distance collapses. You become involved again, criticizing or praising the mind. Pure awareness observes without labeling. It does not say, this is good or this is bad. It simply sees. This neutrality keeps the observer position intact. With consistent practice, awareness becomes more stable. You begin to notice not only thoughts, but also emotions as they arise. You see how emotions manifest in the body before they fully form. This early recognition allows gentle adjustment, slowing the breath, relaxing tension, or redirecting attention. Emotional regulation becomes a skill rather than a struggle. As identification weakens, inner space increases. You feel less crowded by your own mind. Silence appears between thoughts. This silence is not emptiness, it is clarity. From this clarity, responses arise that are appropriate and measured, not impulsive or reactive. This shift changes how you relate to challenges. Difficult situations still occur, but they no longer define you. Awareness allows you to experience difficulty without losing balance. You respond based on understanding rather than habit. This is the difference between reacting unconsciously and acting consciously. Distance from the mind also reduces suffering. Much of human suffering is not caused by events themselves, but by the mental commentary surrounding them. Awareness reveals this clearly. When commentary is seen as optional, suffering decreases. What remains is the simple experience of the moment, which is often far more manageable than the mind suggests. It is important to understand that awareness is strengthened through consistency, not intensity. Small moments of attention practiced daily are more effective than rare moments of deep focus. Each time you notice a thought without following it, awareness grows stronger. This growth is quiet but cumulative. Eventually, awareness becomes the default state. You still think, plan, and analyze, but you are no longer lost in these processes. There is a sense of being grounded while the mind works. This groundedness is inner stability. The power that comes from awareness is not forceful. It is calm and steady. It does not push thoughts away or cling to positive ones. It allows everything to arise and pass without losing center. This is true mental strength. When awareness creates distance from the mind, life becomes less reactive and more intentional. You regain the ability to choose how you speak, how you act, and how you respond internally. This choice is freedom. It is not freedom from thoughts, but freedom within thinking. Discipline is often misunderstood as restriction or force, but in reality, discipline is the structure that allows stability to develop. Without discipline, the mind reacts to every stimulus, every emotion, and every thought. This reactivity creates emotional instability. With discipline, the mind learns consistency, and consistency builds calm. Emotional stability is not a personality trait, it is a trained capacity. The mind is influenced by repetition. Whatever is practiced daily becomes stronger. Distraction, indulgence, and impulsive reactions are practiced, the mind becomes scattered and emotionally fragile. If attention, restraint, and reflection are practiced, the mind becomes steady and resilient. Discipline determines which of these paths is reinforced. Daily practice is the foundation. A mind without routine lacks rhythm, and without rhythm it becomes chaotic. Simple practices performed consistently, such as controlled breathing, stillness, or focused attention, train the nervous system to settle. These practices do not remove negative thoughts, but they change how the mind responds to them. When calm has been practiced daily, it becomes familiar. In moments of difficulty, the mind naturally returns to what it knows. Restraint is another essential aspect of discipline. Restraint does not mean suppression, it means conscious choice. The mind constantly seeks stimulation, validation, and comfort. Without restraint, it becomes dependent on external conditions for emotional regulation. This dependence makes emotional stability impossible. By practicing restraint, pausing before reacting, speaking, or indulging, the mind learns that it does not need to act on every impulse. This restraint creates space. In that space, emotions are felt without being expressed destructively. Anger may arise, but it does not turn into aggression. Fear may arise, but it does not turn into avoidance. Negative thoughts may appear, but they do not escalate into anxiety. The mind learns that emotions can exist without controlling behavior. Reflection strengthens this process. Without reflection, experiences pass without learning. With reflection, patterns become visible. Taking time to review thoughts, emotions, and actions allows the mind to understand itself. This understanding reduces confusion. When you see how emotional reactions repeat, they lose their power. Awareness combined with discipline turns emotional chaos into clarity. Discipline also stabilizes emotions by regulating the body. Emotional instability is often rooted in physical imbalance. Poor sleep, irregular eating, lack of movement, and constant stimulation weaken emotional regulation. Discipline in these areas provides the foundation for mental stability. A regulated body supports a regulated mind. When negative thoughts arise, an undisciplined mind reacts immediately. It follows the thought, amplifies it, and becomes emotionally overwhelmed. A disciplined mind pauses. It has learned through practice that immediate reaction is not required. This pause prevents escalation. Calm is not forced, it is allowed. Discipline builds trust within yourself. When you consistently act with intention, the mind feels safe. It knows that impulses will be handled responsibly. This internal trust reduces anxiety. The mind no longer needs to constantly alert you with negative thoughts because it trusts your ability to respond wisely. Emotional stability does not mean emotional numbness. Emotions are still felt fully, but they pass through without causing disruption. Discipline provides containment. It allows emotions to rise and fall without spilling into harmful action. This containment is strength, not suppression. Consistency is more important than intensity. Small, disciplined actions repeated daily shape emotional responses over time. Skipping discipline weakens stability, just as skipping physical training weakens the body. Emotional strength is built gradually through repetition and patience. Restraint also applies to mental habits. Limiting excessive rumination, negative self-talk, and unnecessary exposure to emotionally charged content protects mental balance. Discipline in attention is one of the most powerful tools for emotional stability. What you repeatedly focus on shapes your emotional landscape. Reflection ensures that discipline remains conscious rather than rigid. Without reflection, discipline can become mechanical. With reflection, it remains adaptive. You learn when to apply effort and when to allow rest. This balance prevents burnout and maintains stability. Over time, discipline changes your relationship with discomfort. Instead of avoiding it, you meet it with steadiness. Negative thoughts lose their urgency because the mind is trained to remain calm in their presence. Emotional storms become manageable because the mind has practiced stillness. Discipline also reduces inner conflict. When actions align with values, emotional friction decreases. Much emotional instability comes from acting against inner standards. Discipline creates alignment, and alignment creates peace. As discipline deepens, emotional reactions become shorter and less intense. Recovery becomes faster. You return to balance more easily. This resilience is the result of training, not luck. A disciplined mind does not seek constant comfort. It seeks clarity. Comfort comes as a result of stability, not as a goal. This shift transforms emotional life. Instead of chasing relief, you cultivate strength. Discipline trains the mind to stay present under pressure. When challenges arise, the mind does not collapse into fear or anger. It remains engaged and responsive. This capacity is invaluable in all areas of life. Ultimately, discipline is an act of self-respect. It is the decision to care for the mind consistently, even when it is uncomfortable. Through daily practice, restraint, and reflection, emotional stability becomes a natural state rather than a temporary achievement. The mind learns how to remain calm, even in the presence of negative thoughts, because calm has been trained. Responsibility is the moment where inner authority is restored. Without responsibility, the mind feels like a victim of circumstances, thoughts, and emotions. With responsibility, the mind regains direction. Responsibility does not mean controlling every thought or feeling. It means recognizing that while thoughts arise automatically, how you engage with them is always a choice. This recognition shifts the center of power back to you. Many people believe their thoughts define them or control them. When negative thoughts appear, they say, "This is just how I am," or "I can't help it." This belief creates helplessness. The mind then continues its patterns without challenge. Responsibility interrupts this cycle. It says, "I may not have chosen this thought, but I choose my response." That choice is the beginning of clarity. Inner authority is lost when responsibility is avoided. Blaming the past, other people, or external conditions weakens the sense of agency. While circumstances influence the mind, they do not determine your inner response. Responsibility does not deny difficulty, it prevents surrender to it. When you accept responsibility for your engagement with thoughts, confusion begins to dissolve because attention shifts from blaming to understanding. Weakness often comes from unconscious engagement. A negative thought appears, and it is followed automatically, believed, and acted upon. Over time, this pattern erodes confidence. Responsibility brings consciousness into this process. The moment you see a thought clearly and choose not to follow it blindly, strength is built. Each conscious choice reinforces inner authority. Responsibility also requires honesty. It means acknowledging mental habits without judgment or excuse. This honesty is not harsh, it is precise. When you can say, "I notice that I repeatedly engage in this type of thinking," you are no longer lost in it. Awareness combined with responsibility creates structure in the mind. Taking responsibility does not mean suppressing thoughts or forcing positivity. It means deciding how much attention a thought deserves. Attention is power. Where attention goes, energy follows. Responsibility allows you to withdraw attention from destructive patterns and invest it in constructive ones. This redirection transforms confusion into direction. Clarity arises when responsibility replaces emotional reactivity. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" you ask, "How am I responding to this?" This shift moves the mind from passive to active. The situation may remain challenging, but the inner response becomes stable. Stability creates clarity because the mind is no longer overwhelmed. Inner authority is also strengthened through consistency. Responsibility must be practiced repeatedly, not occasionally. Each time you choose a thoughtful response over an impulsive one, authority grows. The mind learns that it can rely on you to guide it. This internal trust reduces anxiety and mental noise. Responsibility also brings humility. It acknowledges that growth is ongoing. You will not always respond perfectly. What matters is the willingness to return to responsibility each time you notice unconscious engagement. This return is strength, not failure. Confusion often arises from divided attention. The mind is pulled in many directions by thoughts, emotions, and external influences. Responsibility gathers attention. It unifies the mind around conscious choice. When attention is unified, clarity emerges naturally. Taking responsibility also improves emotional regulation. When emotions arise, responsibility prevents immediate expression. It allows emotions to be felt without becoming actions. This containment protects relationships and self-respect. Emotional maturity is rooted in this ability to pause and choose. Responsibility restores authority because it ends internal chaos. Chaos thrives where there is no ownership. When you own your inner responses, the mind becomes organized. Thoughts fall into their proper place as information, not commands. This authority does not make life rigid, it makes it flexible. When you are responsible for your engagement with thoughts, you can adapt without losing center. External changes no longer destabilize you because the inner reference point is stable. Responsibility also strengthens self-respect. When actions align with conscious choices rather than impulses, confidence grows. You trust yourself more. This trust reduces fear and second-guessing. Decisions become clearer because they are grounded in awareness. Over time, responsibility transforms identity. You no longer see yourself as someone who is controlled by the mind. You see yourself as someone who works with the mind. This partnership creates harmony rather than conflict. Inner authority is quiet. It does not need to dominate or prove itself. It is felt as steadiness. This steadiness allows you to face negative thoughts without fear. You know that regardless of what appears in the mind, you can respond wisely. Responsibility also reveals freedom. Freedom is not the absence of negative thoughts. It is the ability to choose your engagement with them. When you take responsibility, freedom becomes practical and reliable. Ultimately, responsibility restores inner authority by placing power where it belongs, within conscious choice. Weakness turns into strength, because reactions become responses. Confusion turns into clarity, because attention is guided rather than scattered. This is not achieved through force, but through consistent ownership of the inner world.